Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. Most of the things that we're cooking are almost always things that I'm cooking for dinner, but generally, not always, but almost always, are things that I have done recipes for. Most of the time when we're cooking on Monday, we're probably cooking the recipe that I released on Friday. So if you're looking for the recipes, those all live over on my YouTube channel. Every Friday, there's a new recipe that pops up over on that YouTube channel, which if you're watching on Reddit is youtube.com/woocancook. Last Friday, we released a Japanese curry that came out over, last Friday, which was loosely based off of a recipe or a curry that you can find here in the San Francisco Bay Area, actually in San Francisco, in the Richmond district, at a cafe called Bazaar Cafe. I had done another recipe for a similar curry a little while back, but I have changed it quite a bit since the last time I released that recipe, so I decided to redo it and kind of take a shot at coming closer to the version that you can find at Bazaar Cafe. That's a part of a larger series that I've been doing, where I've been reproducing a lot of foods from a lot of local restaurants in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we've done a bunch of stuff from Oakland and in or around the Oakland Chinatown area. So we did a couple of dishes from Nicha Thai, a couple of dishes from Ming's Tasty, a couple of stuff just generally around town. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to YouTube, check out what's going on over there. In addition to all those recipes, we're also streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. So lots of fun stuff coming up. For this particular version of Japanese curry, it probably will look a little bit different from anything else that if you have never done slow cooks in a wok before, it's probably going to look a little bit different, mostly because most commonly when you use a wok, you generally would not use it for a slow cook, because it looks kind of different from, I shouldn't have just chopped this in half, because it looks kind of different from anything else that you would ever do in a wok, mostly because a wok has poor heat retention. So most of the time when you do slow cooks, so things like beef stews and any kind of stew, soups, really anything that has a long cook time, bologneses, pasta sauces, stuff like that, anything that's going to be cooking for a while. We usually do those things in large stock pots, cast iron Dutch ovens, stuff like that, anything that has a large heavy bottom to it because it has more heat retention. There are actually a number of different Asian curries that come together in a wok, mainly for the reason that pretty much everything in like Chinese cuisine happens in a wok. So actually this particular Japanese curry, I should also mention, has a lot of influence from Chinese curry because a lot of the things that I'm doing are things that come from an approach that is inspired by the way that my mom made curry. So we're going to walk through, no pun intended, how to do a slow cook in a wok today, and kind of talk our way through some of the things that we have to do in order to make sure that things go as planned, because we have to treat it a little bit differently than from how you would normally do a slow cook in a Dutch oven, because a wok does not have nearly as much heat retention, so it poses a few problems. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit, and we'll get to all that soon. Yeah, ooh, Brown, thanks for the award. Wholesome award, that's one of my favorites. Okay, Okay, so essentially how we're going to be treating this particular curry is going to be in two halves. So the first half of this curry is going to be done as a normal wok fry, so it's going to look pretty similar to pretty much every other wok fry that you've ever seen me do. We're going to bloom out these aromatics, then we're going to flash cook our meats. And then we're going to, I think, add some veggies. And then from there, what we're going to do is add a wok ring, and then we're going to start slow cooking from there. So that gives us the advantage of using the wok for its really high heat potential and doing a quick flash cook on our meats and spices. Actually, we're going to treat our dry spices very particularly. And then from there, we're going to turn it into a slow cook by using the wok for a slow cook purpose, which actually works really, really well because they're so large. And so far, I haven't really run into any problems with heat retention. So, as with a lot of wok cooks, I'm starting off with, this is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by about a tablespoon or 1 inch's worth of ginger. This is probably a little bit too much ginger. I probably overshot it, but that's okay. I might reserve some of it for something else eventually. Yeah, Brown, yeah, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Hermina, yeah, good to see you. You were missed last stream. Glad to see you're back. Yeah, cool. So that's our ginger and garlic. These are going to go into our wok very, very first. We call these aromatics for the specific reason that what we're looking for are the aromatic flavors from them. So they very, very often come up as the first 2 elements that go into a lot of wok fries because we treat them for their aromatic flavors. So it's not that we're necessarily trying to derive the flavor of ginger and garlic in everything that comes up in a wok, but mostly because they really work well as like the foundational elements of umami. So when we're trying to build out flavors of umami, we start with these 2 things. So next up, this is we're going to be chopping up 2 large carrots and 3 small russet potatoes, or like maybe 2 medium russet potatoes if you have larger ones. In my opinion, this is probably the most iconic part about a Japanese curry is the presence of root veggies like carrots and potatoes. I don't think I've ever seen a Japanese curry that does not include these 2 elements. Maybe without the carrots, but definitely not without potatoes. And it's part of what makes a Japanese curry so hearty. So I love doing it. This is how I've always had it when I was a kid. It is also, I feel like I don't think I've ever seen a Chinese curry done with root veggies, so that's probably where we start separating from the way that a Chinese curry is done. But as far as I can tell, as far as I've researched at least, Chinese curry and a Japanese curry actually look pretty similar apart from a few very particular elements. But the main things that come from Chinese curry that we're going to be doing today are the wok fries. So we're going to be chopping up some carrots here right now, and then we're going to move on to our potatoes. The main thing that we want to be careful of about these carrots is that they're all chopped in similar sizes. We're looking for similar sizes here. So you'll notice that the first thing that I did before I started chopping these carrots is that I sorted them by size. That's really, really important because carrots are very oddly shaped. They're like conical. And since they're so oddly shaped, you can often end up with unevenly cooked carrots because you unevenly chopped them. That's going to be a really, really big problem down the line because you're going to have either overcooked carrots or undercooked carrots, or very, very often you're going to have both overcooked and undercooked carrots, which is never a good place to be. So, yeah, Black Jacket set. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. Glad to see it's your first time here. Oh yeah, Delaware Snatch. Yeah, we're streaming every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. And if you haven't yet, definitely check out the YouTube channel. That's where all of the recipes live and stuff. So all of the things that I cook on stream, there's definitely a lot of people here, so I probably should introduce myself again. Everything that I cook on stream, it has a recipe video that goes along with it. So if you're looking for how to cook the things that I'm cooking on these streams, that all lives over in a recipe somewhere over on YouTube. Usually in those recipe videos, they move a little bit slower, and I kind of talk through some of the decision making that goes behind why I do certain things. Most of the time when I do a recipe, it's probably hacking another version. Sometimes from local Bay Area restaurants. Very oftentimes I'll be hacking something from like a Chinese American classic. So this particular curry is based off of the one that we're doing right now is a recipe that you can find, is from a version that you can find, excuse me, at a cafe in Oakland or in San Francisco called Bazaar Cafe. So that's the version that we're replicating today. So if you're interested in finding those recipes, definitely hop over to the YouTube and check out what's over there. Lots of fun stuff. There's a whole series that's dedicated to just reproducing foods from the San Francisco Bay Area food scene. Probably the most popular one that people are really stoked about is a series that we've been doing where I've been reproducing foods from Chinese American cuisines. So we'll do a lot of, like, if you've caught one of these streams before, you'll probably know because I cook a lot of random stuff from like P.F. Chang's, Panda Express, stuff like that. And I kind of like take a look at what some of those American classics are and like what are the American parts of those American classics. And what do they look like if they weren't so American? So if like we were to take a look at like, say for example, General Tso's chicken, I think that was one of the very first ones I did. And like take a look at like what does General Tso's chicken look like if it's not so Americanized, which is really interesting because a lot of what General Tso's chicken is really just American fried chicken. That's basically what it is. So what that series ends up being is like a lot of times we're just deconstructing stuff from like the Panda Express menu or the P.F. Chang's menu, stuff like that. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to YouTube, check out some of those videos. They're really, really fun. People like to binge them, I've heard. I have friends that, or I've heard people say that they have watched several hours of me just chopping stuff over on YouTube. So that's new. There's definitely a lot of different, a lot of content now over on that series too. So you can, for sure, binge several hours of stuff on the Bookmark YouTube. Does the type of potato matter? Yeah. So I like using. So today I'm using a russet mainly because they're really cheap and you can buy them in really large quantities. You can do them with. You can do it with Yukon Gold. You could probably do it with anything. I particularly like using russets because they're a little bit more hardy. I guess all potatoes are generally pretty hardy. The main reason I like using russets is because they're really affordable. So you're not gonna drop a lot of money on them. You could probably also you could maybe even substitute out the carrot for a sweet potato. That would be really cool too. So get creative with it. What's tricky about a potato though is that they're also, just like the carrot, is that they're very unusually shaped too. Actually, there's a couple things that are weird about potatoes. But just like any tuber, it's shaped in a very odd size, so it tapers off towards the ends, which means that when we chop it, we have to be careful about that, because if we just leave that end on, what will happen is, if we leave this end on right here, what will happen is this part of the potato right here is going to end up overcooking or probably undercooking because it's slightly thinner than the rest of the potato. So what I like to do is trim off that little bit right here. And on both sides, and that gives us a more even piece of potato when we start chopping it up, so that nothing overcooks or undercooks. So that when we look at what we have here, what we end up with are relatively even-sized pieces of potato. Whereas if we had left these little bits on, probably would have caused some problems. So it takes, maybe another 30 seconds, but it will make a huge difference in the long run. Will it be spicy? It depends. That all depends on how you want your curry. What's really tricky about a curry is that how it tastes is very particularly tied to what's in your curry powder. So a curry powder is really just a spice blend, which means that how it's going to taste is going to depend on what's in your curry powder, which is a problem because most of the time that we use curry powder, it's probably a store-bought thing. And unless you know exactly which type of curry powder that you're using, it's probably going to change every time that you buy new curry powder. So I've been looking into how to make my own curry powder of late. I haven't actually gotten around to doing it because it takes a lot of time. I probably got to get a new spice grinder first too. But that's definitely one of the trickiest parts about curry is that you have to rely on curry powder blends, which is going to be a problem because we don't actually know what that curry powder blend is going to taste like. So for a while when I was doing this particular curry, it was a little bit spicy, but the main reason that it was a little bit spicy is because the curry powder I was using was too spicy. So then I changed curry powders, and then it kind of changed profile. And probably when I run out of that curry powder, it's going to change flavors a little bit again. So that's like one of the nitpicky things that's kind of been causing issues for me when I've been making this curry, is that everything is going to depend on the use of what kind of curry powder you use. It's also the main reason why, so some folks have asked me about boxed roux, because Japanese curry is very often made from a boxed roux. But it's also the same reason why I have stopped using boxed roux. And that's because if you use that boxed roux, it's going to taste like whatever's in that boxed roux. So you're going to be stuck with whatever that tastes like, because you're not able to really adjust. So when I use my own curry powder, it kind of gives me a little bit more leeway, but I'd like a little bit more control from there. Good question, though. Alright, so the most important thing that we want to do anytime that we work with potatoes, especially russet potatoes because they are very starch heavy, is that we want to rinse them off. So just like when you make hash browns, if you've ever made hash browns with a russet potato, the thing that makes it stick together is this potato starch. Russet potatoes have a lot of potato starch, and that's what causes your hash browns to stick together. We don't want that. We want that starch in a lot of cases, like hash browns or latkes, for example, because it's what's going to cause those things to bind together. When we're using potatoes in this scenario, though, especially in a curry like this, we don't want that starch, because what's going to happen is it's just going to cause all of the potatoes to stick to each other. And then we're going to have clumps of potatoes, which is not good. So first thing that we want to do anytime that we're working with russets in a curry is rinse it off. Rinse all that starch off, get all that starch off, so that your potatoes don't stick together. And then the second, and also maybe most important thing that you want to do when you're working with a russet is soak it in water. So before you start cooking, or while you're waiting to cook with your russet potato, keep it soaking in water. This is super, super important because russet potatoes oxidize really fast. They will probably start oxidizing within 5 minutes, maybe even less than that. So that means that unless you're ready to cook with these potatoes in 5 minutes, which we're probably not going to get to them that quick, you want these to be sitting in water until you're ready to use them, because otherwise they're going to start turning pink, and then you're going to end up with pink potatoes, which is unattractive. I've definitely made that mistake. Yeah, spices are cheap. Yeah, so if you're really committed, it's probably not that hard. I just need to. I have a good recipe for it, actually. There's a really good recipe for curry powder that Andrew Ray did on the Binging with Babish channel, and I've just been meaning to get to it. I just never actually have gotten around to it. But it's mostly just like a handful of ingredients, mostly chili powder and turmeric. I think that's mainly what's in curry powder. But really, what I'd like to do is grind the spices myself. So. Because when you grind fresh spices, you can retain more flavor from them. So, on my to-do list, but also totally unnecessary. You could just use curry powder and you'll be fine. All right, so the last thing that we're doing here is dicing up a sweet white onion. These are going to be a pretty small dice here. I'm leaving the root on in this dice to make sure that it all holds together while I do this dice. So you'll notice at the very end we have this root. This is the root end of the onion, and that's going to hold the thing together while we slice. The onion container is the door. Yeah, I love this onion container. It's super useful. Before I got these onion containers, I used to use Ziploc bags to hold the onions in, and I would use so many Ziploc bags because I use so many. I never use an entire onion. I always use half an onion for like every recipe, which means that like every time I use an onion, there's probably a Ziploc bag, which means there's like hundreds of Ziploc bags going on every year. So I love those onion containers because it saves me so many Ziploc bags. Alright, so these are our onions. These are going to be the last thing that go into our curry. Onions are really, really delicate, which means that anything that's going in, anytime you're using something delicate in a slow cook like curry, they need to go in really, really late because otherwise they'll just disappear. So I have definitely experimented with adding these onions in really early, like with the aromatics. And what happens is because an onion is like 90% water, if you add it too early, it will literally disappear. You will just not have onions in your fry. You might have onion flavor, but you're not going to get much else from it. So those onions, make sure you add those very, very late. All right. What makes curry so light versus the so light versus the normal gold orange color? That has a lot to Hermina, good question. That has a lot to do with again with the curry powder, which is why I say it's so important to start making my own curry powder. It's got to be on my to-do list soon. But it has a lot to do with the color of the curry powder for sure. And what makes curry powder yellow is turmeric. So it all comes from turmeric. This is my curry powder. You can kind of see. So camera contrast is kind of just a little bit. My curry powder is like a dark, almost red. It's like dark orange, so like burnt orange. And then what's going to brighten it up a little bit is actually I'm going to use some turmeric too. So I like using both curry powder and turmeric. So we could take a look. The colors are dramatically different. But the thing that makes curry powder yellow, or like bright yellow or bright orange, is all coming from the turmeric. So that's definitely like the predominant spice in a curry powder blend. It's definitely turmeric, cumin, chili powder. I forget what else. Something else. Probably cayenne pepper. A couple other things in there. Yeah, what is miso curry? That's a good question. Just something that I added to the title. Probably because the reason I call it a miso curry is because we're going to be using white miso, which is definitely not normally found in a curry. So this is white miso. White miso is just like miso, but it's a little bit lighter in color. So this is what our white miso looks like. If you've worked with miso paste before, or if you've worked with regular miso paste before, it's probably slightly darker. I love using white miso for this particular curry because it adds just like a little bit more, it just adds a little bit more punch and like a little bit more umami, just a little bit more flavor. And it's just like something that I've been kind of missing in this curry for a while. And I think that the addition of miso paste just gives us that last bit of fermentation that we're needing. That's really holding the curry back, which like a lot of times, a lot of people will incorrectly try to account for by adding more salt, or like doing things like just generally adding more salt, which is not the right move to do because it just makes it more salty, or like doing things like make it more spicy. Neither of those things are in the same realm or like sphere of what umami is. So I found that by adding this miso paste, it really just creates that last bit of punch that you need, that like lands somewhere in between savory and salty. Fenugreek. Yeah, that's probably a big one. I'll actually have a bottle. Take a look. All right, so here's the curry powder. This is probably the next one I'm going to be using. Coriander, that's a big one. Mustard seed, that's another big one. Fenugreek, paprika, cayenne, cardamom, nutmeg, cinnamon, and cloves. Some of those are probably not in all curry powders. Cloves, probably. Cinnamon is probably not found in all curry powders. Nutmeg, maybe. Cayenne, for sure. Cardamom, I'm not sure about that. Paprika is probably what makes it spicy. That's probably a big part of what's making it spicy. Fenugreek is definitely one of the iconic parts of curry powder. Cumin, mustard seed, and turmeric are the three things that are probably making it so yellow. And then coriander is probably a very, very big one for sure. But yeah, the way that curry powder tastes, it's going to depend on like how much of each of those things are in that curry powder. So if you're if you're using a pre-blended spice, you won't know what it tastes like. It's going to depend on what that curry powder tastes like. So that's been a real weird, frustrating thing for me lately. All right. So next up, what I'm doing here is I'm assembling my sauce base. So this is going to be where all of the flavors are going to come into play in our curry. So I love assembling this stuff off heat. before we head over to the stove because it gives us the opportunity to taste it. Actually, it gives us two different things. The main thing is that it gives us the opportunity to taste it. The second and probably just as important problem that I've encountered is that miso paste is very difficult to break down. So you'll notice it's in large clumps here. If we just dump that into the curry, it will probably clump up. And that's going to be a big problem because you're going to have clumps of miso paste. So by assembling this in the sauce off heat first, you'll have an opportunity to break down that miso paste. But more importantly, it also gives us the opportunity to taste it, which is always a little bit difficult to do in anything that's slow cooked, because when you're slow cooking something, you won't actually know what it's going to taste like until it's reduced. So until essentially it's done cooking, you're not actually going to know what that thing tastes like. So that's going to be a big problem in a curry like this, because you're going to have to wait like at least 30 minutes before you'll know what it tastes like. All right, so that was 2 tablespoons of miso paste, 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. This is a 1/4 cup of sake. And then earlier, 2 tablespoons of mirin, which is a Japanese rice wine. So that's where all of the flavors and acidity is going to come from, is from right here and all of this stuff. So we want to do 2 things here. First thing that we want to do is break down this miso paste because it's in large clumps. And then once that's broken down, we can stop and taste it and adjust for seasoning. Who taught me how to cook? I taught myself, mostly taught myself, but also like my parents, and just generally like cooking stuff that I see. I am not a trained chef. I went to school for music, and then pre-COVID I used to play music professionally. And then all of that disappeared when COVID happened, so I started this YouTube channel, and now we're here. Yeah. Throw away trash. Great trash count. Alright, so I'm breaking down my miso paste. You'll see it's a little bit stubborn because miso paste is very, very thick. So we want to make sure that there's no clumps of miso paste going on here. Otherwise, you're going to have clumps of miso paste in your curry. Yeah, that's looking good. Alright, last thing we want to do is taste it. Usually I like to add a little bit of salt. This definitely needs a little bit of salt. It actually needs a little bit more sweetness. So I think I'm going to add a little bit more mirin. I like to just generally taste and adjust to season. So use your best judgment at this point. If it needs something, add it. Mine was a little bit lacking in the salt department. And needed a little bit more sugar, so I added a pinch more mirin. Yeah, and that's doing it for me. You hate littering. Yeah, that's cool. Actually, that is not what I was expecting. I like that. I guess I just assumed it was a throwaway Reddit name, but it's not a throwaway Reddit name. That's cool. Cool, man. All right. Next up, we're getting to our chicken here. I love using chicken thigh for this particular curry because the chicken thigh, the extra fat of the chicken thigh, is going to help build out our thicker curry, a thicker curry for us or a thicker wok fry, excuse me, in the early half of our cook time. So. The first thing that we're going to do is flash cook this chicken, and the extra fat is going to give us a little bit of extra help because we're going to need it in the wok fry. I have done this curry with literally every kind of protein that I can think of. I guess I've never done it with red meat, but definitely with chicken breast. I've done it with chicken breast, chicken thigh. I've definitely done it. I believe I've done it with lamb at one point. I've done it with tofu a lot. I've definitely done this curry with tofu. I've done it without protein entirely, so if you don't want to use any of these things, you can totally leave it out because there's so many starches involved already. It will definitely hold up. But ultimately, I think my favorite is going to be the chicken breast or chicken thigh because it has a little bit of extra fat, which is going to help us in the wok fry. Yeah, this YouTube camera, it's really nice, but it keeps shutting off. I gotta figure out how to shut off the shutter. Yeah. Cool. So that's our chicken thigh. We're going to do a couple of things for this chicken thigh to make sure that it holds together in the wok fry. The first thing that we're going to do is give it a little bit of marinade. So we're not going to get super fancy with the marinade because it's not going to really matter that much because it's going to be long cooking. But I do think that giving it a little bit of extra flavor in the marinade is going to give us a little bit more depth of flavor in the chicken. All right. What's the best way to prevent splatter? Ooh. Honestly, I just sort of gotten used to it. Yeah, I'm assuming you mean oil splatter. I have not found a good way to do it or to prevent oil splatter. You can definitely get oil splatter screens, and those work really well. But I found that they get in the way a lot, and it kind of just adds another thing that you got to clean later. So you got to clean the oil splatter screen. So honestly, I just got used to the fact that I'm going to have a little bit of oil burns on my arms, which is probably not the smart thing to do. But probably the most important thing to deal with splatter is you got to clean the stove every time that you cook. Literally, you're going to have to scrub the stove, or at least wipe it down for oil. Every time that I cook, I clean it. So. That's how you get ants. Right, so for our chicken, it's going to be real simple. This is just going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, a pinch of salt, and I ran out of white pepper, but white pepper is really great in a chicken marinade like this. I don't have any white pepper right now, so I'm not going to use any. But the last and probably most important thing that we're going to add to this chicken is a 1/4 teaspoon of cornstarch. So this is going to be what keeps the chicken from becoming super rubbery. So a wok heat, when we're throwing this into a wok, is really aggressive. So if you're not careful, the exterior of the chicken will cook a lot faster than the interior of the chicken. And then you're either going to have undercooked chicken or you're going to have rubbery chicken that has like an exterior, a really rubbery exterior, which is not great. So by coating it in a little bit of cornstarch in this marinade right here, that's going to delay that cook time a little bit, just long enough so that the interior of the chicken can catch up a little bit. So it doesn't take very much. Definitely don't overdo it on that cornstarch, otherwise the cornstarch is going to end up in your curry, and then it's going to start affecting the texture and thickness of the curry. But just a 1/4 teaspoon of it, maybe a 1/2 teaspoon, and that will keep it from overcooking. So if we're really committed, this should probably marinate for at least 30 minutes. It's not going to go for 30 minutes. Probably will go for like 10 minutes. Splatter screens are not for serious cooks. Yeah, maybe not. I've never really gotten that into it. I know that they work. They for sure do work. They will prevent your stove from splattering. But they're probably just super annoying to clean, and I don't want to deal with it, so I don't use one. Ultimately, I think the answer is you just gotta clean the stove more, which is a pain in the butt. But, yeah, cool. Let's head over. Wait, did I forget something? I did. Let's do one more thing. All right, last thing that we want to do before we head over to the stove is put together a cornstarch slurry. So this is going to be something that you will find comes up in a lot of Chinese cooking, which is essentially cornstarch that's dissolved in water. And the idea here being that the cornstarch is going to be what thickens up the curry. So until we add this cornstarch, our curry is going to look pretty loose, and we're going to have kind of a liquidy, watery curry, and the cornstarch is going to be the thing that creates a thick and like luxurious curry texture. So I think of it a lot as like how you use pasta water in Italian food. It's where it's like the pasta water is the thing that we use in Italian food to create thick sauces, and like pasta water, at least in a carbonara, for example, is what creates thick, creamy carbonaras. It's all coming from the pasta water. So in Chinese cooking, we do something very similar, but not with pasta water. We do it with cornstarch. Arguably the most important element to any curry. Okay, I'm gonna get my wok preheating, and then once it's nice and ripping hot, we can start cooking. This GoPro takes a long time to start. All right, so I'm preheating my wok here. We want it ripping hot before we start cooking, so we're looking for a wok that's billowing with smoke. We want a lot of smoke on that wok before we start cooking. Otherwise, we're going to end up with mushy chicken, which is not going to be good. So the first half of this wok cook, or the first half of this curry, is going to look very similar to every other wok cook you've ever seen me do. We're going to bloom our aromatics first, so the garlic and ginger, and then we're going to flash cook our chicken, and then we're going to add our root veggies from there, and start building out our slow cook from there. So the first half is a very, very fast wok cook. The second half is a slow cook, similar to how you would do anything else in a Dutch oven. Yeah. So while that's preheating, I'll introduce myself one more time. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing a Japanese white miso curry that's loosely based off of a curry that you can find here in the San Francisco Bay Area. From a cafe in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Richmond district, called Bazaar Cafe. This is part of a larger series that I've been doing over on my YouTube channel, which is dedicated to reproducing foods from the San Francisco Bay Area food scene, which has been super fun. We've done a couple of dishes from the Oakland food scene, done a couple of things from San Francisco. We did a few things from Dragon House. A lot of the things that we cook in general are really based off of like things that I've been eating since I was a little kid. So most of the time when I'm cooking something, I'm probably either cooking something or it's inspired by things that I've been eating since I was a kid. So probably we have a bunch of different series that are happening over on the YouTube channel. My favorite one is the Chinese American food series, which a lot of people have been really stoked about, where we've been kind of like picking things from like the Panda Express menu and the P.F. Chang's menu, places that are really, really Americanized Chinese food, and deconstructing them and kind of taking a look at what are the American elements of Chinese American food. So things like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, kung pao chicken, Mongolian beef, stuff like that. All of those things, they come from, like, probably have some origin in Chinese food, but for the most part are really just Americanized Chinese food. So really interesting to kind of like take those dishes apart and see like what are the American qualities of General Tso's chicken, which is usually most of what General Tso's chicken is really just American food. General Tso's chicken is really just like American fried chicken in like a honey glaze, or not a honey glaze, but like a sweet and sour sauce, sweet and savory sauce, I guess. So a lot of stuff like that we've been doing. Usually in that series, I'll deconstruct it and then reassemble it with like a more traditional Chinese approach to wok cooking, and kind of take a look at like what would these American classics look like if they were actually traditional Chinese food. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check out what's going on over there. What's the top right of the screen say? Yeah, I guess it's probably a little small. On the top right, that's everyone who has subscribed, so that's all of the fun people. Probably the last 10 people who have subscribed. I don't know that it auto updates anymore. Sometimes that alert list is kind of broken. Probably should open some windows. So yeah, if you haven't checked out what's going on over on YouTube, I highly recommend hopping over and checking out what's over there. If you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen, which is youtube.com/WuCanCook. We're working our way to 2,700 subscribers by the end of March, so if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, hop over and check it out. Lots of fun recipes. Those are out every Friday, so this Friday, last Friday, I released the recipe for this curry, so we're cooking through that recipe that came out last Friday. This Friday is going to be a recipe for Taiwanese popcorn chicken, which I'm super stoked for because they were probably one of the best fried chickens that I've ever made. I made it for a Super Bowl party and it was super, super tasty. Those new recipes, they're out every Friday. We're also live streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. So there's a whole schedule of when those live streams are happening and what I'm going to be cooking on those live streams. That also lives over on the YouTube channel. So if you want to find out what I'm going to be cooking next, you can find that all over on YouTube. So yeah, so if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely hop over and take a look at what's happening over on YouTube. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Let's start. Yeah. Oh, do I speak any other languages? I speak a little bit Idian Mandarin. I've been kind of working on it. I'm not so great at it. I definitely took like 4 years of Mandarin in middle school and didn't remember any of it. So. But I'm slowly learning. Language is hard. Chinese is really hard. It's a weird written language. It's very confusing. It's very different from English for sure. Cool. So my wok is pretty hot. You can tell there's lots and lots of smoke billowing off of my wok, which is a sign that we have lots and lots of heat. That's really, really important. So that means two things. The first thing that means is that your wok is ready to cook. The second thing that it means is that your house is probably going to start filling with smoke. So before you start cooking, make sure that you unhook all of your smoke detectors, or at the very least, make sure that all of your windows are open. And if you have an overhead, turn that overhead on. Oh, who's my football team? I grew up watching the Niners. I live in Oakland. I'm not a big Raiders fan. I probably should be a bigger Raiders fan. But yeah, I grew up watching the Niners. That's who I was watching when I was a kid. I also went to Cal, so I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan. I'm not a Packers fan. I'm an Aaron Rodgers fan, and I will watch whichever team Aaron Rodgers is playing for. All right. So let's start cooking. So I'm starting off, this is going to be 4 tablespoons, maybe a little bit more than that, of peanut oil. And then we're going to do our long yao, which is the process of adding cold oil to a hot wok. And that creates our non-stick surface. And then we're starting with our aromatics. This is our garlic, followed by our ginger, which is definitely too much ginger. And then we're going to let those go for just long enough until they're fragrant. So use your nose. Usually that's about 10 seconds for me, but start smelling. When you start smelling garlic and ginger, that's when you know you're ready. Yeah, you have to be really, if you want to learn a new language, you have to be really passionate about it. I've been doing it every day for the last year. But only in really small increments for 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes a day, every day for the last year. And it's sort of it's sort of starting to work, but for the most part, it's just moving really slow. But I totally agree. You got to be really committed to it. All right, so I'm adding my chicken in next. I'm doing my best to hold back on the liquid of our marinade here. We want to try and reduce some of that liquid because the chicken fat is already going to add quite a bit of liquid. So you can take a look. At the bottom of the bowl is all of our soy sauce. And as that chicken fat starts to reduce or to render, we're going to start building up moisture in the wok. So that's not the end of the world. That's okay, actually. That's part of why we wanted to use chicken thighs, because it has extra fat. But we also want to be careful at this point, because if too much liquid starts accumulating in the wok, it's going to cause the temperature of the wok to start dropping, and then we're going to have a mushy chicken, which is not good. So at this point, we're being very careful to make sure that we retain as much heat as possible. All right, that'll probably go for maybe another minute. Well, your 3-year-old sends lots of love. Yeah, cool. Bunny yams, thank you. Hello to your 3-year-old. Oh, your ex still has to translate, yeah. Spanish is a little bit easier for me too. Probably because it has origins from European languages, so it has more crossover from English. But at the very least, Spanish has an alphabet. Whereas Chinese is just about like memorizing thousands of characters. So, and like the worst part about Mandarin is that there are words that sound the same but are written different and mean completely different things. So depending on the context of the word, it can mean something completely different, which is crazy. All right, so now that we have started, our chicken is nice and rendered. You'll notice there's lots and lots of fat going on down here. This is going to be really, really useful for our spices. The chicken does not have to be fully cooked, so don't worry if your chicken is not all the way cooked through. There's going to be quite a bit more cook time going on here, and it's going to have plenty of time to cook through, so don't panic if that's not cooked all the way through. And then I'm adding my dry spices here to the chicken fat and oil. This is 3 tablespoons of curry powder plus a single teaspoon of turmeric. And we're going to let those dry spices bloom in the oil. That's going to be really important because this is going to release all of the flavor of those spices is going to come out when they come into contact with that oil. So just like we do with aromatics with our garlic and ginger, we want it to make contact with that hot oil so that we can remove or pull out all of those aromatic flavors from it. Otherwise, you're not going to get any flavor out of it. All right, from here we're moving on to the slow cook portion of our curry. So I'm adding my root veggies, that's my potatoes and carrots. Followed by our sauce mixture. And then, what is it, half a cup. Next up is half a cup of beef stock. For a curry, I usually just eyeball it because we're just going to let it reduce anyway. And then finally, it's going to be 2 cups of water, which again, for a curry, I usually just eyeball it because this is all going to be about reduction anyway. The proportions of the liquid elements to our curry are not that important because it's going to be reducing and cooking for quite a while. So even if you are to measure it very, very particularly, ultimately what will happen is if the certain elements are not all the way cooked through, I'll probably just add more water to make sure that they have enough cook time. So I'm adding my wok ring here, and then we're going to let this go for, this will probably go for maybe 15 minutes, maybe a little less than that. And you'll notice there are 2 things that we haven't added to our curry yet, one of which is, take a look, there are 2 remaining things that we have not yet added. Back over on the cutting board. The first is our onions, and the second is our cornstarch slurry. So there are 2 different reasons why we haven't added these yet. The first, for our onions, are really, really important. We don't want to add these until the curry is pretty much done. These are probably going to go in at the last like 3 minutes, maybe like 5 minutes left of cook time before we add these onions in. And that's because they are really, really delicate. So if you add these too early, they'll probably just disappear. And the cornstarch we want to save till the very, very end as well, so that we can know how much our curry needs to reduce before we throw it in. If you throw this in too early, then it will probably look thinner than it will ultimately end up being. So before we add the cornstarch to thicken things up, we want it to be at its reduced and like final reduced stage before we add the cornstarch. Otherwise, you're going to end up with an unclear idea of what the final like ultimate thickness of your curry will actually look like. So super, super important. Save those 2 elements to the very, very end. Otherwise, you're going to mess up. You'll also notice that I haven't seasoned the curry at all. So no salt, nothing, no forms of seasoning have entered the curry yet. And that is very, very important. When you're slow cooking something like a curry, make sure that you don't add those anything that has seasoning, so salt, pepper, anything like that. All of those are things that we want to save until the very, very end once it's fully reduced, because otherwise you could potentially over-season, because you won't actually know what the curry is going to taste like until the very, very end. Yeah. Oh, you like the, yeah, Hermina, you like the bigger view. Yeah, lots of people say that. I've heard that over on YouTube the cameras look a lot better. You can watch on like a wider screen. Yeah, Reddit is locked to the smaller screen, which is why I think actually I don't know if the event list is actually legible on Reddit. Maybe it is, maybe not. I'm not sure. But yeah, definitely there's fancier cameras too. So we have this nice GoPro and the fancy DSLR, which we can kind of see. So you can see it in the back. The GoPro is the one that's strapped to the top of the stove, which is really great. And you can see the DSLR is right here. Yeah, you can kind of see it. That would be this one. Whereas Reddit is just streaming from this phone. Yeah, I like the YouTube version too. I like both, actually. They're both good places to be. All right, so we're gonna let this go. This will probably go for another maybe 10 minutes, maybe a little less than that. We don't need this to be fully reduced. Really what we're paying attention to at this point is the consistency of the curry. And more important, probably the most important thing that we're watching are the thickness of the potatoes and carrots. We want those to be fully cooked through. If you're really committed, you could let this long cook for at least an hour or like up to 2 hours. And it would taste that much better, because the longer that something long cooks, the better it's going to taste, because those flavors are going to start developing a little bit more. I have not long cooked this for that long in a while, mostly because I just don't want to be cooking for that long. But if you're really committed to it, you could absolutely let it go for 15, maybe like an hour or up to 2 hours. And really all you need to do is make sure that you continue to add more water to it while it long cooks, and it will just start to mature and like really build like more depth of flavor as it like cooks. So I think they're very similar to the way that you would do like a bolognese, for example. A bolognese has to long cook for a super long time, like a minimum of 2 hours, or else it like really doesn't taste very good. You'll probably taste all of like the canned qualities of like your tomato paste and stuff like that. But the longer that you let a bolognese go, I usually like to let a bolognese go for up to 4 hours. And it like matures in that flavor. And that's going to be true for really anything that you long cook. Oh, Charlie, tips about managing space in a small kitchen. I like, honestly, I didn't realize that my kitchen was that small until the people on Reddit and YouTube started pointing it out. But the more that I thought about it, and the more that people have pointed it out, I've started to realize that it is really small. Like, it didn't really bother me before. Until someone pointed it out, and now it bothers me all the time. But honestly, I like have gotten into a really good groove with the smaller size of this kitchen, mostly because it's like easier to move around in, because like everything is close enough where I'm not like running around the kitchen a lot. So when I cook in like my parents' kitchen, for example, like on the holidays and stuff, I find that I'm like walking across the kitchen quite a bit, because things are put in so many different places. So actually, like, the larger kitchens have been like more of a problem for me. If I did like upgrade the size of my kitchen, probably the main thing that I want to upgrade is the size of my stove, because a 4-burner stove is a real like pain in the ass. Because a 4-burner stove, if you're cooking on a wok, is really just a 2-burner stove, because the wok, you can't put anything on the back burner of the wok, because the wok is going to be going back and forth. So for the most part, if you have a 4-burner stove, it's really just a 2-burner stove, which is, and then if you only have a 2-burner stove, what that really means is that you have 1 burner and then 1 simmer. So because they're at 2 different heats, so you have a main burner that's really high and then a low simmer burner. So if I had like one thing to like update, it would probably be I would get a bigger stove, like a 6-burner stove top, which would be really nice. But also I don't really need that. This would probably be fine. I very rarely use more than 2 burners at a time anyway. Yeah, but yeah, totally. Space management in a kitchen, I think it's really just about like, for me, it's always just been about like having a good idea of like everything that you're going to be using before you start cooking. So, like especially like when I'm streaming, for example. So you notice that there's a cabinet that's behind the camera over here. That's where all of the spices are. So If there's anything that's in that spice cabinet that I haven't gotten out when I start cooking, I can't get to it because the cameras are blocking the cabinet now. And that's actually like very representative of like how I like to approach cooking, even when I'm not streaming. Is that you need to have everything out first, because otherwise you're going to be running around the kitchen and you're going to have like rummaging around for stuff. And so like usually what I like doing is like I like to have at least one space that's good for prepping, which is usually right here. Even if I'm not streaming, it's usually right here because this is where my cutting board is. And then one space behind me for the stove. And then there needs to be at least one other space where I like stage stuff. So over here, I don't have a camera over here. No, those cameras don't move. But over to my left, there's that's where I stage everything. So there's like all of the sauces, any like veggies that I've taken out, like aromatics, any like salt, pepper, cornstarch, all that stuff is over here. So it's not actually in the cabinet. So at this point, it doesn't matter how small the kitchen is anymore because I've taken everything out already. So I'm not like, very rarely will you see me like reaching into the refrigerator for stuff because I've taken it all out already. So I don't need to like worry about whether or not it's like behind a bunch of stuff or anything. So yeah, really like thinking about like how to like work around the small kitchen is really just about like workflow. I think that's like a big one. Oh yeah, every time you've watched me make a curry, you've only seen me use carrots and potatoes. Yeah, that's definitely pretty typical. The probably the other curry that I'm thinking of right now that I haven't made in a long time. I haven't made it since October because it was the last time I had pumpkins, but was a Thai pumpkin curry, which is like very similar in concept. Which is essentially instead of carrots and potatoes, I was using pumpkin, and then the spices are varied very differently because it comes from Thai food. But really, you could use any kind of veggie. I would say probably if I was going to add another type of veggie, the next thing I would love to add is a bell pepper. I'm pretty sure I used bell pepper in the Thai pumpkin curry. Also, really great addition are nuts. So cashews, I think I used cashews in that pumpkin curry a lot. I've also toyed around quite a bit with lentils, which work really well in a curry. So like plus I think the lentil curry I used crushed tomatoes. That wasn't my recipe, that was someone else's recipe. But it's a really, really good one. Yeah, anything that has a lot of sturdy quality to it. So yeah, probably the only veggies you see me use are potatoes and carrots because this is probably the only curry that I actually cook on stream. I definitely want to make that pumpkin curry again, but I just haven't had pumpkin in a long time, so I haven't really had the opportunity to make it. But next time that I come across pumpkin, the original reason why I had written that recipe is because I had a giant jack-o'-lantern that I just saved and then messed around with it because it was perfectly a pumpkin. So yeah. Yeah, but Hermie, to answer your question though, carrot and potatoes are definitely like, in a Japanese curry, probably the most common one that you'll find. In a Chinese curry, it probably looks a little bit different. Like you definitely would find a bell pepper, probably like string beans or green beans probably would come up quite a bit. Really any kind of veggie though, like any kind of hearty veggies that's not going to fall apart in the long cook, for sure. Oh, you have a tiny kitchen, you reduced all of your appliances. So, stand mixer. Oh, all in one pressure cooker, that's smart, yeah. Most of my appliances are stored away somewhere. So like, actually the rice cooker's out because we're cooking rice later. But yeah, I also have a stand mixer that's stored somewhere. I have an Instapot that's stored somewhere. I have like a lot of large appliances. Actually, and there's also a number of appliances that I just haven't bought because they're way too large and I don't have the kitchen space for it. So that's like another holding factor behind why I don't have some fancy stuff. That's probably the main reason why I haven't gotten a spice blender is because I don't want to buy another kitchen appliance. It's probably pretty small though. Yeah, that's coming along. But yeah, definitely space is a limiting factor if you're in a small kitchen. Probably I own a stand mixer, but it's really, really space inefficient, which is why I had to store it. But very, very useful if you're ever baking. So. Also, another good point is all of those things. So this is like especially important if you wok cook a lot. But generally, anytime that you're wok cooking, oil is flying in the air. That's going to happen, especially if you're deep frying stuff. It's going to happen. There is no way of avoiding that. If you're going to cook in a wok, that's going to happen. Which means that any time that you have something that's out in the kitchen, it's probably going to get coated in a layer of oil at some point. Which means that you're going to have to clean it a lot. You have to clean that layer of oil off all the time. Which means that if you have like large appliances, it's going to be to your benefit to put them away so you don't have to clean them all the time. So I used to have my stand mixer standing out here, and I had to clean it all the time, even though I wasn't using it all the time, because it kept getting covered in oil. So another big problem of having a tiny kitchen. Ooh, parsnips, yeah, totally. Parsnips, I see parsnips a lot in like soups. I have not experimented much with parsnips though. Yeah, definitely a lot in soups for sure. You could probably use a parsnip in a curry for sure. Parsnip is a very hearty veggie. I have not worked with it a lot. I forget, I made something recently with it, but I can't remember what. I think it was like a salad. Yeah. Cool, yeah, good questions, guys. All right, so this is reducing quite well. Probably going to let this go for maybe another 5 minutes, maybe give it a little bit longer than that. And that's really just to let some of those carrots and potatoes start tenderizing a little bit more. And then from there, we're really just going to wait for some of that liquid to cook off. I would say that it needs at least 5 more minutes before those potatoes start becoming tender. I guess we could check it right now, but I'm pretty sure they're under still. Oops. Yeah. Yeah, they're slightly under. Probably need another 5 minutes before they're done. Cool. Yeah, so we're going to let that go for another 5 minutes. We're going to keep an eye on those carrots and potatoes, make sure that they're cooked all the way through before we pull them. And then from there, it's really just going to be about letting that water reduce a little bit so that we have a cohesive curry base. Yeah. Cool. All right. Hello to everyone just joining. I'll introduce myself one more time before we finish up this curry. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we're making a Japanese curry that I've been making for many years now. This particular version is loosely inspired by a version that my mom used to make, actually. Is the original version of this curry is based off of a version that my mom used to make for us, which she gave me the recipe for, and then I looked up and tried to reproduce it and discovered that she was not following that recipe card anymore. It was like very, very different. And then I discovered that she was probably improvising quite a bit and then just ad-libbing from there. So I started messing around with it, and this is where it's at right now. Largely inspired by a version of a curry that you can find at a cafe in San Francisco called Bazaar Cafe, which is also a music venue. That's probably where I got some of the very first gigs that I ever played were at Bazaar Cafe. So not only does it have a very, very popular curry, but it's also a very popular music venue here in town. So if you happen to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, definitely drop in on Bazaar Cafe the next time you can. I'm pretty sure that they're open during COVID, so you can find some curry from them. We're right on the cusp of finishing up this curry. But if you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about curry, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful. This particular curry is based off of a recipe that came up on my YouTube channel last Friday. So pretty much every Monday, unless the recipe that I released is not something that I can eat for dinner, usually every Monday I'll be cooking something that is a recipe for what came out last Friday. So last Friday was the recipe for this Japanese curry. Next Friday, or this coming Friday, is actually Taiwanese popcorn chicken, so I'm not going to eat that for dinner, so I probably won't be cooking through that one. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free and drop them in the chat. There's lots of fun recipes. Those are coming up over on my YouTube channel every Friday, so if you haven't checked out what's happening over on YouTube, there's lots and lots of fun recipes. I definitely recommend hopping over and checking what's that stuff about. Pretty much everything that I'm cooking on stream has a recipe that goes with it, so if you've caught one of these streams before and didn't know what I was cooking, there's probably a recipe video that lives over on YouTube. pretty much every time that I cook, so there's probably a recipe video. So in those recipe videos, they tend to move a little bit slower, and I kind of like to talk through some of the decision making behind the recipes that I'm doing, and like why I add certain stuff, and like just generally like where some of these inspirations come from. So in this particular curry is part of a larger series that I've been doing, where I've been hacking a lot of foods from the restaurant scene here in the Bay Area, which is why this one is inspired by Bazaar Cafe in San Francisco. There's a couple of series that are going on right now. There's another really fun one that's entirely dedicated to foods from TV and film. Done a couple of things from Legend of Korra, Avatar, which are super fun because there's a lot of like travel-friendly Asian food in that series, because that's what they do all the time, is just travel a lot. And then there's another series where we've been reproducing a lot of foods from Chinese American cuisine, kind of taking a look at like what Chinese American food is, and then reappropriating it and kind of taking a look at what Chinese American food would look like without the American quality. So if we were to approach things like honey sesame chicken from an Asian, like traditional wok fry approach, kind of takes a look at what some of those things are. So like the honey sesame chicken, for example, we did with a tempura batter, which was super fun, and then leaned very heavily on the use of sweet chili sauce, which was really fun. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to YouTube, check out what's going on over there. Lots of fun recipes. Those are every Friday, and then we're streaming Monday through Thursday. That all lives over on YouTube. Oh, how very sweet. What does a wok ring do? Yeah, that's a good question. So a wok ring is super, super important anytime that you're slow cooking, or especially if you're deep frying in a wok. So you can see underneath my wok, that's the wok ring. That's going to be really, really important if you have a round bottom wok, because if you put a large amount of stuff in a round bottom wok, it really will just keep rolling around. Because the bottom of the wok, unlike any other frying pan that you've ever owned, the frying pan will sit firmly on the bottom of the stove. Round bottom wok will not sit firmly on the stove because it's got a round bottom, which means that it rolls around a lot. Now, some people like to just add that wok ring and then just cook on that wok ring, which I don't like doing because it kind of makes it harder to do wok tosses and like move the wok around. It does mean that it's very unstable, which means that I have on multiple occasions, at least 3 times when I was first learning how to use a round bottom wok, dropped the wok on my foot and spilled hot food everywhere, which is not fun. I'm pretty sure I did that once on stream too, which is not fun. You want to be really careful about that. But I actually think that without the wok ring, you can navigate and move the wok around a little bit easier. So super useful. But definitely when you're slow cooking, and absolutely when you are deep frying, you want more stability in that wok so that it's not rolling around. So the wok ring is really, really important, mostly just to keep it in place. Another good solution, if you don't want to deal with it, is you can also get a flat bottom wok, which solves that problem for you, because it has, just like any other frying pan, a flat bottom to it. So if you've never cooked on a wok before, a flat bottom wok will probably feel most similar to a standard frying pan. So I always tell people, if you've never cooked on a wok before, probably the first wok that you get should be a flat bottom wok, so that it feels a little bit more like a frying pan for you. Alright, so I just added my onions here because we're pretty close to being done. The onions will need maybe 3-4 minutes before they're done cooking. We're going to give it a little bit of time, and then we're pretty much there. I'm going to give it a little bit more water because I'd like a little bit more cooked on. Alright, I just added, that was maybe a 1/4 cup of water. And that's just to extend our cook time a little bit because this is reducing a little bit quicker than I'd like it to. Yeah, good to know. Yeah, super useful. Definitely, if you're in the market for a wok and you get a round bottom wok, which I will only recommend if you cooked on a wok before. Make sure that you pick up a wok ring too. Usually, if you find a round bottom wok, most of them will come with a wok ring. And if it doesn't come with a wok ring, it probably will be sold right next to the round bottom woks. Because most of the time, you probably would not ever buy a round bottom wok without a wok ring. But yeah, you will also notice that if you've ever seen me deep fry stuff in this wok, that I also always put that wok ring down, because deep fry oil in a wok is very dangerous if the wok is rolling around, because deep fry oil is very, very hot. So. Cool. Actually, before I turn this off, we can take a look. So we have one more thing left to add to our curry, and that would be our cornstarch slurry. So this is the very last thing left to add. This is, if you weren't watching earlier, this is just 2 tablespoons of cornstarch mixed with water. Super, super important that we want this stuff mixed with water, because we don't want to just add cornstarch to a curry like the one that we're cooking, because this particular curry, and most curries, have a bunch of stuff floating around in it. So cornstarch will clump up with literally anything that's not liquid. So I've even tried to dissolve it in like sauce bases, and even then it will clump up with like red chili flakes. So you make sure that you absolutely don't want to add this stuff unless it's dissolved in water, because otherwise it's going to start clumping up. It also has a habit of turning into a gelatinous texture if you mix it with hot water. So very specifically, we want this cornstarch slurry to be dissolved in cold water. You could use ice water, but I usually just use like cold tap water, and that does the trick. But I have done it with boiling water before for no reason other than it was what I had on hand, and then it turned into a gelatinous texture, which is not bueno. Right, I'm adding a little bit more water here because I'm just trying to extend our cook time a little bit longer so that our onions have a little bit more time to cook down. We're looking for our onions to be a little bit more translucent than where they are right now. That will probably take maybe 2 minutes, and then we should be ready to go. Yeah, you can commiserate, I have a small kitchen, for sure. Yeah, honestly, I didn't notice that this kitchen was that small until some people on the internet started pointing it out. I guess like in the Bay Area, this would be considered like a relatively large, like at least here in Oakland and San Francisco, this would be considered a pretty large kitchen. Or like larger than, at least larger than other kitchens that I had here in the Bay Area, for sure. So, but yeah, now that I think about it, like outside of the San Francisco Bay Area, it's probably a pretty small kitchen. Cool. Yeah. All right, it's coming together. I'm gonna give this maybe 1 more minute for these onions to sort of start cooking down, and then we can start moving on. All right, so you'll notice that my curry is pretty loose, especially because we've been adding water to it. So that's giving it like a little bit more of a loose texture. As soon as we add this cornstarch, it's going to become a little bit thicker, and that's going to create like that thick and like luxurious texture that we associate with Japanese curry. So that starch from our cornstarch is going to start thickening up, and now you notice that the curry just went from pretty loose to pretty solid, like pretty thick, pretty creamy in texture, and that's what we're looking for. And finally, the last thing that we want to do is taste it for seasoning and adjust. I'm going to give it a little bit of salt. That ought to do it. All right. Make sure, you'll notice that I mentioned this earlier too, but I did not add any salt until the very, very end. That's super, super important because you are not going to be able to tell what this is going to taste like until it's fully reduced, because if you taste it before it's reduced, it will probably taste a little bit more bland because it has more water to it, so it's not quite as concentrated. So really, really important, before you start seasoning with salt, let it reduce first. Wait until the very, very end. So, folks who have watched these streams before will know the very last thing that we want to do anytime that we cook in a wok is clean it. Super, super important. While the wok is hot, we want to give it a rinse and clean out all of this stuff that is stuck to it. If you don't clean it while it's hot, all of it will start sticking more thoroughly. So while the wok is hot, we have this nice non-stick surface. So we can pop that over to the stove. What I just did was gave it a rinse in the sink. And you'll notice that everything just came off. I did not make any contact with the wok. Everything just came right off with a little bit of water. So that's super, super useful because that non-stick surface from the wok is doing a lot of work to let some of that stuff come off. If you sit down and then start eating and then come back 45 minutes later or something after you finish dinner and then try and clean the wok, you're going to have a lot of stuff that's stuck to the bottom of the wok, which is going to be a problem because now you have to do things like scrubbing and like you have to use Brillo pads and sponges and stuff that you generally don't want to be using in a wok, which probably you'll be okay if you do it once or twice. If you mess up, it's not a big deal. You can totally do it. But you don't want to be doing that all the time because what will happen is eventually you're going to start scrubbing off the seasoning of your wok, which is never a good thing. So from here, it's pretty much just like any other cast iron pan that you've ever used. We're wiping all of the excess stuff that didn't come off down. And then I'm coating it in a little bit of oil all around the bottom too. And that's going to prevent any oxidation. And that ought to do it. Cool. Is there a particular reason why I use a wooden spoon? Yeah, so like, good question actually. My mom actually lectured me about this too. More commonly, when you see like wok chefs, you'll see them use something like this. Well, you can see, which is essentially a metal spatula. Kind of looks like this. You super often will see wok chefs either use some combination of a metal spatula or sometimes a soup ladle. So lots of times you'll see wok chefs cooking with literally a soup ladle, and then they'll just shovel with something like this or something like this. I don't use either of those things unless I have a particular reason for using a utensil like that, because I found that the metal edges of the spoons have started scratching the wok, and they've been like chipping out off some of the seasoning. Then like the more that I've read into it, basically the solution to that is the edges of the utensils are supposed to wear down as you use them, which is like never. I don't like that as a solution. So I like using a wooden spoon or wooden utensil because it won't scrape away the seasoning of my wok. What I would like to do is find a wooden utensil that was more shaped like this, so I can use it more in more traditional use of like wok cooking. But I have not yet found one. I have not found one that looks like that yet. So. On the market, if anyone knows where I can find a spatula that looks like that, but is made of wood instead, and that will prevent the seasoning on my wok from scratching off. I'm looking for one. So yeah, super important. I don't know how other chefs get away with doing it, or I guess I do. Essentially, it's just like the edges start dulling over time. But when I have used those metal utensils, they just scrape the wok, and then I have like gnarly gashes in my wok from the metal utensils. Okay. Yeah, good question though. Yeah, yeah. My mom has lectured me quite a bit about using that metal. Actually, she was the one who bought me that metal spatula, and I used it like once or twice, and then it started scraping the wok, so I stopped using it. But definitely, if you've ever watched like wok chefs cook before, you probably see them using something like that. Yeah, I could probably commission one from Etsy. Yeah, there's a really good Etsy shop that makes copper utensils. I've been like looking into those. I think copper would work better, although I don't know why you would need to make a cooking utensil out of copper. That seems like a waste of copper. Anyway. Cool. Let's taste it. Ooh, yeah. Super flavorful. Like all of those flavors combined are like really coming together. Like really interesting depth of flavor that you like. A lot of that is coming from like all of the different sources of fermentation that we added. So like the soy sauce, the oyster sauce, the mirin and the sake, and the miso paste all come together in sort of like that like combination of umami all combined together to kind of like create that flavor that you're tasting. And then that slow cook really makes like a really tender and like biteable piece of potato and carrot that's like very tasty. This is like one of my favorite comfort foods. I've been eating this curry for as long as I can remember. Before, like my mom used to make it when I was a kid, and then my brother used to make it for me. I'm pretty sure he was trying to figure out my mom's curry. I have the original recipe for my mom's curry, which uses the original recipe. I think it uses chicken breast and then like white wine or something. It's like one of the most Americanized Japanese curries that I've ever seen, and it is way off. It's not even close to what the original curry is. So I don't know what recipe my mom's following, but that's it. Ooh, we just lost Reddit. Anyway, I'm not gonna bother restarting it. Thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, with new stuff coming out every Friday over on YouTube. If you have not caught one of these streams before, they're happening pretty much every week, every day now, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. New recipes, those are coming out over on my YouTube channel every Friday, so if you're looking for those recipe videos, they're happening every Friday. So the next one that's coming out is going to be this coming Friday for a Taiwanese popcorn chicken, which I'm super stoked for. It's a good snack food. Yeah, lots of fun stuff coming up very soon, including all of the recipes that are associated to these videos. So if you haven't checked out what's happening over on YouTube, definitely hop over and check out what's going on over there. Lots of fun stuff coming up very soon. If you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about YouTube, but I know I don't know everything about cooking, but I know lots of stuff. So definitely hop over and check out what's going on over there. I'll be around cleaning up and stuff, so feel free and drop your questions in the chat. Yeah. All right, thanks everyone. I'll see you soon. I restarted Reddit for no real reason. This will probably go for maybe like a couple minutes. So. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you soon. Oh yeah, we're also working our way to 2,700 subscribers by the end of the month over on YouTube. So if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, feel free to hop over to YouTube and give it a subscribe. Only if you're interested. Please don't subscribe if you're not interested. I really don't understand why people subscribe when they're not interested. Why are you doing that? All right, I'll see you soon.
I'm in love with your body. I'm in love with your body. I'm in love with your body. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you.
When we can, we let the story begin. We're going out on our first date. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up your plate. We talk for hours and hours about the sweet and the sour and how your family's doing okay. And leaving, getting a taxi, kissing the backseat, tell the driver make the radio play. And I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me. Say, boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead.
I'm in love with the shape of you. Push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. Last night you were in my room. Now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. 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 Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you.
Come on, be my baby, come on. 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 Come on, be my baby, come on.
I'm in love with your body. Come on, be my baby. Come on, be I'm in love with your body. Every day discovering something brand new.
Keep my hands on myself. Think I'll dust them off, put them back up on the shelf. Case my little baby girl is in need. Am I coming out of left